America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and I'm going to go through this rather quickly because this is going to be a fascinating show. If you've noticed, I've moved home because I'm trying to, socially distance myself and be responsible in this time of the coronavirus. And I think this is going to be a good show. It's going to be on populism, right and left, and why kind of the middle of the Democratic Party is not going to be good for us. So I was reading this book because I do read books from time to time called The Populist Guide to 2020. And would you believe I'm in it? Yes, me. This guy. All right. So the author is this woman named Crystal Ball. She runs a show called Rising. It's on the internet. It's very well produced. I don't think they do it from their living room. But it's actually pretty decent political talk. Like inside the Beltway political talk online. So I watch it and we go back and forth on emails every now and then. And I think she thought what I said was interesting enough that she used some of my insights in her book, which I appreciate because Ms. Ball is one of these rare white women who's not scared of other white women. We think that the big disciplinary apparatus in the United States is like this white guy, like who looks like Trump or has a Klan robe on, but actually, make no mistake, it's actually their wives who kind of keep labor and racial justice submerged. And let's be honest, and I can say this because this is my own show. Nobody else will say this, but it's the truth. Your left movement, your populist movement will only be as strong as your most fragile white woman. I'll say that again. Your left movement, your populist movement will only be as strong as your most fragile white woman. Because if like some other white guy, some other guy in the room is scared of the risk, or doesn't want to take a chance, you can just tell him to suck it up. And you can just tell them to suck it up. You can actually use rhetorical force and not have to worry about their feelings as much. But the way we've gendered risk in society, you can't just tell white women to suck it up. Or you can, but you're just a bad leftist then. Honestly, you tell the wrong white woman to suck it up, you end up in jail just for saying suck it up, because then there are tears and then it's a whole thing. But she is the rare white woman who's okay, who I would actually trust having my back against other white women. And that's a rare thing. For example, Bernie Sanders tried that with Elizabeth Warren, and we saw how that worked out. So she's actually a good ally, Crystal Ball is. And she actually understands populism. This is a pretty decent book. You should read it, not just for my insights, and because she has a good taste in Negroes, but because it's actually a decent understanding of working class and not so much racial, but working class struggles and black people. We work for a living. So anyway, we were going back and forth on email, and she said, "Oh, come on in." And so I printed my notes and I came into her show and we taped a segment, but it was a little bit of a mess for a variety of reasons. But I'm going to go through the notes rather quickly. So you're going to get the full argument right here. And you're going to understand populism. You're going to understand the right side of populism. You're going to understand why centrist adults aren't populists. And you're going to understand the left side of populism. Because the question that has driven this entire discourse is, why aren't there more adult left populists? I'll say that again. Why aren't there more adult left populists? Because there should be adult left populists. I think there should be adult left populists, but there aren't. There are adult right populists. We saw them in the Tea Party. They would come in and they pay for a lot of things. And the adult Democrats liberals are not populists because there's something anti-political about liberalism. Now the left are populists, but the left are young because then they'll grow up into being, adult liberals, and, the movement falls apart. So I'm going to explain the moves, and I'm going to do all of that once we hit the opening.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and it can feature in your front.
All right, I am back. So, like I said, I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but it's on YouTube, so you can people just watch the video a few times and work out the arguments in the comments and work it out together. Because when you do the mental work with me, that way we all grow. I can't think for you, just the way I can't eat food for you, and you can't just watch me eat and you get full. You need to actually do the work yourself sometimes. So, like, listen to what I say, read the comments, comment, and then go back and forth. And then it'll start making sense because I'm right. It just, it might take a while for you to see that. So there's a difference between what mature citizenship looks like for conservative Republicans and what mature citizenship looks like for conservative Democrats. And that's one reason that's the case is because the right doesn't have the same phobias about structural power, right? Whereas liberals, they don't want to actually deal with structural power. What they want to do is have all the choices within the structure, within the given structure. But it also ends up being ultimately contradictory because you can't govern without concerning yourself with power. And you can't be self-determining without concerning yourself with how the structure within which you make your choices is designed. So liberals will say something like, well, nobody can tell me what to do with my body. How many times have you heard liberals say that? Nobody can tell me what to do with my body. My body's mine. No, that's not true. I could say something harsher, but I won't because I kind of want to keep this G-rated. But that's just not true. It's never been true. We used to have a draft. We used to take whole bodies. But of course I can tell you what to do. If there's a coronavirus immunization and we're going to debate about it and pass laws, and if it's a forced immunization, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to force you to get immunized. I'm going to put that into your body. That's just the way it works. I mean, it works that way for a few reasons. Bodily autonomy is justified insofar as it allows you to express your wishes without being externally determined. So I get to know that your wishes are really yours. But once you get your wishes out and then we all decide through a political process and it's a just, fair process, we can do to you what the process says we can do to you. That's why we sometimes put people in jail. That means we sometimes send people to war. That means sometimes we make you get a vaccination. As long as the vaccination allows you to talk about why you don't want a vaccination, we're still going to vaccinate you. So this whole idea of like, well, nobody can tell me what to do with your body. No, that's never been true. You live with other people who are susceptible to your body. So we're going to we share this world. So that's never been true. All right. So the conservative right gets that and the hard left gets that. The hard left gets that. Look, neither markets or individual choice are going to desegregate our schools or get the lead in the water. And the conservative right gets that because they're very serious about the content. So they take the adult business of citizenship as designing options among which liberals choose. All right. So, it's just a liberal center fails to consider how self-determination takes state power or institutional power, but freedom is not an individual affair, right? And let me break down the difference between a conservative, a liberal, and a left, right? The conservative, I do what I'm going to do because that's the way my dad did it. That's the way I'm supposed to do it. I haven't really thought about it too much, but that's just the way it's supposed to be. And maybe God wants me to do it that way. It depends on the tradition. Or I've been argued about it, but I've come in with this argument with these such presuppositions that it all ends up as if I'm just going to do what tradition dictates me to do. Tradition, convention. I can argue, but I argue from traditional presuppositions and conventional presuppositions. All right, that's conservative. Liberal. You know what? I don't want to do what tradition says. I should be able to choose for myself. Just because my dad was a dentist doesn't mean I want to be a dentist. I picked dentistry because dentistry is one of these professions that's a striking number of dentists come from other dentists. They beget dentists, and then they have children who are dentists. Same with pharmacists, if you don't know that. If you know a pharmacist, ask what their parents did. And don't be surprised when they say, well, my dad was a pharmacist too. So the liberals say no, I shouldn't have to do what my parents wanted me to do just because my parents wanted me to do it or because my parents did it. I should be able to choose, which is actually, seems to be a legitimate concern. People should be able to choose their options and should be able to think outside of the box of society and create something that's valuable that's not already in society. So it's actually a wonderful thing. liberalism is a wonderful thing and it's an improvement over convention. However, it's also very unstable, right? Convention and tradition, no matter what, I can only fall so far. I can only go so high or do so different, but I can only fall so far. Now that we've liberalized society and it's all on the market will leave you behind. And there's no good name to rely upon for you to earn your keep. So there's a way in which you've emancipated yourself from convention, but then given yourself to the market, which is kind of another sort of jungle. We've just gone from the jungle to the concrete jungle. Still jungle. And then on the other side is the left. Now the left will say like, all right, so liberalism solves these problems with conservatism. It emancipates people from tradition, but it puts them under the dictates of the market. And let's say I spend 10 years trying to design beepers, and then all of a sudden Steve Jobs invents an iPhone. That's 10 years of my life wasted, and I don't have a place in the market anymore. So we need to figure out a way to secure people from kind of the swings of the market. We need to secure their water. We need to secure their rights in a way that the market won't. And since the market has just washed away with tradition won't either. So the left actually sees like, all right, so the market is good, but it solves a lot of problems, but it creates a different quality of instability in our life. And the goal is self-determination, right? The goal is being able to make plans and then enact them. But in order to make plans and enact them, you need the world to kind of be relatively stable. And markets aren't particularly stable unless you are an enormous financial institution. Then you can get the government to backstop your risk. So I'm alluding to the $1.5 trillion in debt swaps the Fed is just greenlit. And I feel some sort of way about that. It's complicated, but I do feel some sort of way. All right, so when there's a populist revolution on the right, they harness power through mature, productive institution whose legitimacy is already baked into the ideology. Like the right takes churches seriously. It's already baked into the ideology. And so when there's a populist sentiment in the right, like it already has an institution that takes cultural content seriously. Like the Tea Party could recruit from churches because the right, as a traditional ideology, takes institutions seriously, traditional institutions, right? In contrast, democratic institutions are politically vacuous. This is why if you try to go to a liberal church, it turns out it's kind of hard to figure out where the theology begins. Because if everything's about choice, there is no content there. If we're just kind of hazy about content, try to be everything to all people, then it turns out you're nothing, and then when you then get pressed, you start becoming really authoritarian because you don't have any content that's only yours. You only have the conservative content. So centered democratic institutions that are market-based tend to be, in terms of content, vacuous because with markets, you don't really need reasonable content. It's all about taste. I like it, so I do it. And when I stop liking it, I throw it away. That's market ideology. Some people think about marriages and spouses that way. Some people think about relationships and friendships that way. Some people think about parents that way. If I like it until I like it, and then when I don't, I throw it away. It's just a market ideology. All right? But this is also why you can have Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. I think he's an idiot. I can't be alone in that. And since, once again, I have a little bit of control of this space, I can just say Chuck Todd is a doofus. He might actually be stupid. He's definitely not wise, but he might actually be stupid. But you can have Chuck Todd on Meet the Press reading polls as a form of analysis. Reading polls as a form of analysis. Anybody who's telling you polls and calling that like analytics is not serious about governing towards freedom. Now, because polls are merely people's opinions. It might be what's popular, but it's popular without any thought or without any reflection. On the other hand, on the right, you'll have Rush Limbaugh drilling down arguments about freedom for 4 hours and then have Sean Hannity do the same thing for another 4 hours on the radio because these people are serious about freedom. They kind of care about your opinion, but mostly they're going to give you arguments about why you should share their judgments. Right? So when a populist revolution in the Democratic Party occurs, their mature adults do not have the resources to accommodate or even understand it. Because the center of both parties, but especially the Democratic Party, is anti-political. Anti-political. The center is anti-political. They do not want to govern. They'd rather let the market or an algorithm or polls or even a hazy interpretation of science rather than take the risk to produce institutions that sustain a just world. Now, you have to understand that when you leave it to the market, when you leave it to an algorithm or polls or a hazy interpretation of science, you're actually outsourcing thinking and judgment. And that's a problem. And it'll actually lead to an authoritarian impulse when you are given to judge, right? So that's why you have Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn wants to cancel the DNC debates. I could bring in I don't know. Just trust me. Just Google Jim Clyburn. He's a congressman in South Carolina. He wants to cancel the DNC debates just because he doesn't believe in democracy. And he doesn't have any ideas or content of his own. So when people who don't have democratic content in their mind are given power and have to make a judgment, they're going to tend towards authoritarianism. Like, you need debates in a democracy. You've got the candidates have to be able to distinguish themselves. Right? So Jim Clyburn wants to cancel the DNC debates. It's an authoritarian impulse that takes over because conservative Democrats don't have a worked out sense of democracy. In the same way that Elizabeth Warren has no worked out sense of solidarity in a movement. If you don't know, people who don't have a worked out sense of self-determination through institutions end up being tyrants once they have institutional authority. It could be the tyranny of a person's appetites, or the apolitical tyranny of the data. It's not an accident that Nate Silver or Ezra Klein or all of the analytics crew are so very popular among conservative Democrats. You can read 538 or all of the Washington white papers, those little policy papers that interns churn out. You can read all of them in the world and not learn anything about the legitimate institutions of governments and self-determination in an industrial democracy. You'll just have a scientific aggregation of choices resting on the authority of choice, which is fundamentally unstable and vacuous. I'll say that again. The authority of choice, just like it's a matter of taste, is fundamentally unstable and vacuous, as opposed to judgment, which is going to be reasoned out through argument and held together by reason and argument. In contrast, ingrained in conservative Republicans, for example, Rush Limbaugh, you don't secure self-determination by choice alone. You need to actually control the content of what is being chosen. And this content is created by cultural institutions that intentionally and purposefully they control. The right may be anti-government, but it is not anti-political. I'll say that again. The right and the conservative right might be anti-government, but they are not anti-political. They are very serious about political institutions of ideological control, and they include, for example, churches, schools, as forms of ideological controls. And when populists rise up on the right, they do it through sustained institutions that they have been programmed to sustain as a matter of argument, duty, and tradition. When populists rise up in the center, it will look like the Women's March. Which I took to be ultimately reactionary and confused. And I'll say that because look at it. I often bring up a picture of a woman in a pussy hat posing with a cop. And by the way, if you're posing with a cop and you might not be doing revolutionary work. I'm just putting that out there right now. But this is another one saying, if Hillary was president, we'd be at brunch. Right. And I believe it. If Hillary was president, they would choose not to do politics and they would go to brunch. And this is not just one woman's sign. It was kind of a thing. It was kind of a thing. Here we go. Here's another one. And there are others I could bring up. Brunch, brunch, brunch. Right? So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you one thing. If Hillary was president, you know what I'd be worried about? I'd be worried about the hookworms. The hookworms are a disease of extreme poverty that's thriving in the U.S. South, right? And make no mistake, your white lady allies would be at brunch. And that's why we still have hookworms. And that's a problem, right? So, and then I said before, if you're protesting with cops and you have a cozy relationship with cops, just what are you protesting? Or is that a parade? I kind of think the Women's March was just a big parade. For a few reasons, but so when populists rise up not in the center, but on the left, they're going to sound like Crystal Ball and Ed Schultz, and they're going to be downright unemployable. And if you're a black guy like moi, you might be down white unemployable. And honestly, at risk of catching a bullet for the trouble. So if you believe in anything I'm doing, or if you think if I should continue to do it, go ahead and go to www.thefunkyacademic.com and kick down for $5, $15, or $50, because the kind of political education I'm giving you is the kind of political education you need, but other people get paid a lot of money to shut me out. So I'm going to need you to help me do the kind of work we need to be made whole. And that's getting the kind of labor and racial justice that black people and people in America need to be secured by right. All right, so here's why choice or taste or opinions politics is anti-politics and why adult Democrats aren't politics. If I had thought through my life, I'm going to give you an example. If I thought through my life and made a judgment to be a vegetarian, let's say I walk into a restaurant and the only options are beef and chicken. I have a choice, but I don't really have self-determination. I could either starve or eat meat. If I starve, I'm nothing. If I eat meat, I'm not a vegetarian. So I cannot self-determine myself as a vegetarian. And you can even give me more choices, right? You can even give me fish, but that doesn't solve my problem. In order to be a vegetarian that's self-determined, I need to not only have choices, but I need a fair say in the options among which I choose. I need some sort of tofu or hummus option. You can say, well, vegetarian army, you should go to another restaurant. But that's not a secure option. It's like, it could be the same somewhere else. That's like saying someone who works a crappy job can just go to another job. Telling a slave, well, you could just go to another plantation. Well, the problem isn't like this plantation or that plantation. The problem is I don't have say in my working conditions. When the truth is that the populist response is to organize and to get a fair say at the job you're in, or to organize for a vegetarian option. If we're going to go with my food example. But that disposition for organization to produce options that reflect you is an institutional position. It's a position that says production matters, and that includes the production of ideas. And in a democracy, the production and distribution of ideas is where the power is. That's the adult business of democracy. And conservative takes that business of citizen production very seriously. It's integrated into family, work life, and church life. You know, I'm reminded of, I first started realizing that there's a difference between conservatives and Democrats, like back in 2012, in terms of populist movements. Back in 2012, in the Obama administration, there were school closings left and right, and I was in Chicago, and there was a big charter school movement, advocate movement, and it was kind of a populist movement. And so the left charter, or the liberal charter school advocates were like, well, we want choice. That was all just a masquerade for trying to avoid poor black people and the problems that poor black people bring because we're poor and stigmatized. But they would want choice. They just wanted their kids to go to a school, do very well, and end up at Harvard. They didn't care what was in the content of the curriculum. They just wanted choice to avoid black people. I always say the middle class identity is pretty much the ability to curate which black people you're around. If you can curate that, you're middle class. If you can't, then you're struggling to be able to curate the black people you're around. And that's a problem. That's why the middle class identity in these United States is always going to be white supremacist. There's housing policy and school policy and a generation or 100 years or 400 years of terrorism that can account for that I'm not going to go through right now. But just know that middle class politics in the United States is both fighting against the predations of the rich and the justice claims of the poor. So the liberal charter school advocates just wanted to avoid stigmatized communities. The Republican charter school advocates were a different one. They were a different breed. They wanted charter schools because that way they could control the content of the curriculum. And that is fundamental. They didn't care how well their kids did in school. They wanted control over what is being taught. They wanted control over the ideas, and that's the kind of power they wanted. And that's a fundamentally different approach. They didn't care. They didn't want a choice, but not choice. They wanted choice and content control in a very serious way. They didn't want that evolution being taught in their schools. They just wanted the ability to not have to deal with other people determining the options among which their children learn. Right? And so the conservative electorate takes control of institutions and the content of institutions very seriously. That's why there's no center Democrat. But the liberals don't. They just want choice. It ends up being vacuous because content is a part of freedom too. But there is no center Democrat version of focus on the family. And focus on the family, they design curriculums. It's not an accident that the textbooks are written and produced in Texas, right? The center Democrat liberal version of marriage is no-fault divorce and therapy and reading Eat, Pray, Love, right? Now, the left populist version of these issues of, say, the family is going to concern how we need to subsidize childcare or subsidize elder care. Or maybe we should think about subsidizing house cleaning the way we think about garbage pickup. Should it really be a privilege for the wealthy? These are questions that adults should be working out and advocating for and against in public. But Democrats will just let the markets decide, and Republicans will have arguments that come down for why we should just force wives to do it. But at least they'll have contestable arguments about why that's the case. Right? So there's no space in the adult democratic imagination for citizenship to carry the responsibility to produce ideas and then impose those ideas that secure self-determination. Right? And the notion that you actually have to impose your ideology or your worked out judgment in order to govern, in order to sustain self-determination, isn't really something that liberals are comfortable with. They're like, well, I don't want to tell other people what to do. And conservatives are like, I want to tell you exactly what to do. And the left needs to be like, all right, so this is why we need to make you do this. But we're serious about making you do this. Because that's the only way you get lead out of water. The market will not keep lead out of black people's water. The market will not confiscate Jeff Bezos' money in order to secure clean drinking water and septic systems in the rural South, right? So the left is going to have to use force, but it's going to do through arguments about freedom, robust arguments about the content of freedom. All right, so liberals in the center have this aspiration to offload politics onto taste and to science. So it's going to either come down to politically vapid feelings. Oh, I didn't like the mean tweet some Bernie Sanders supporter sent me, so I'm going to not vote for everyone to have health care. Those are politically vapid feelings that are given authority through liberalism because liberalism is all about taste. And taste doesn't have to be mediated through arguments. It's just, or politically technocratic, right? Well, this algorithm says that, we should do this. I have a chart that says we should do this. And that's still not political judgment. That's just a lot of data. You know who else generated a lot of data? The phrenologists, who decided that you could judge a person's character by the bumps on their head. They had data and charts, and it was just science, right? So the authority of science masquerading as, or offloading politics onto science, it's called scientism. Offloading politics onto bad science because they're usually faulty presuppositions built into both what the content of the subject matter is and the method used to evaluate it and investigate it. So it's bad science. But this offloading politics onto bad science is just a form of political evasion. It's a form of anti-politics. that liberals do rather, comfortably, right? So if we're dealing with feelings, they're unstable because feelings change. And if you're dealing with purely technocratic approaches, they don't actually change people's ideas about the government's role in securing rights in our lives. And that's the work of political education, just understanding the role of government in securing rights in our lives. And I always say, well, not always, Lester Spence has a great distinction between activism and organizing. Activism is telling truth to power. Organizing is actually growing people's capacity to govern both themselves. And when you govern yourselves with others, because we live with others. Right. So I have been, like I said, there's a lot of arguments I just put through, but it's right. So what you should do is go back through this video, watch it a few times, send it to all your friends. You're not going to church this Sunday because, you might get the COVID-19. So instead, maybe you should just watch this video with your family and talk about it. Talk about it with all your friends. Definitely email this around, because this video will tell you why there is not going to be a liberal populism that's mature, and why the DSA left, the Democratic Socialists of America, which you should join actually, are going to be young. And the adult populists on the right are going to be very serious, and they're going to be adults, because those populists and the left populists both take institutional control and content seriously, whereas the liberal groups, insofar as they are populists, are going to be populist as a matter of taste. Their aspiration in politics is to avoid politics. Whereas the right sees it as a duty and the left sees it as a responsibility. The liberals in the center, and liberal in the sense of Adam Smith liberal, market-based liberals, the liberals in the center will see it about choice, and they want the choice to avoid politics when it gets too messy, the choice to avoid risk, the choice to avoid discomfort. And they'll think of that as politics. I was talking to my students about this, and not this in particular, but just about the choice and content of politics, the form and content of politics. And I was saying, look, if you have to pick a date and you have to pick between Chad and Brad, you have choice. You could either go with Chad or you could go with Brad. I teach a lot of white students, so you can either go with Chad or you can go with Brad, but that's not really, you'll feel alienated with both of them, right? So your problem isn't the choice between Chad or Brad. And if they add a third person, Thad, that's not going to solve your problem either. Right? You still have 3 alienating options. What you need to do is figure out how to get a substantive say in the blank blank ad producing industry. Because we churn out Chads and Brads and Thads, and we don't churn them out particularly well. So what you want is actually to be able to have a substantive say in the ad producing industry. You want to control churches, sometimes family structures, definitely the curriculum of the educational institutions. And that way, what's produced in that factory will actually be someone you want to date. So that's kind of how I talk about it with students. But just understand that freedom has a form and a content. The form of freedom is choice. The content is the options among which you choose. If you take choice more seriously than control over the options among which you choose, you're actually just working for somebody else. Also, this is my problem with the UBI as a justice enabling condition. The UBI is a universal basic income. Let's say we give everyone $1,000, right? So that'll be great for debt service providers and rent and landlords, but you can't build a business off $1,000 a month, and you can't save for a down payment off $1,000 a month. What it is a reaction to the fact that as it stands, people are so poor. The bottom 40% of Americans are so poor, that the people who make things can't make money. They're just racking up debt. Because the people at the bottom are just racking up debt. So you give them a little bit of money, but not control over production or how much things cost, and you functionally depoliticize them. You give them a little bit of money to shut up, but they don't control production. They've never controlled production, and they don't have any control over how much things cost. But now you can find them, like you can find them and police them, and they'll buy your stuff. So these people voting for a UBI, especially the wealthy people, be very suspicious of wealthy people who are in support of the UBI, because they don't do it because they want competition. They do it because they want customers. It'll make you the ideal customer, and customers don't have any real power because real power is in production. All right. So I hope this has been enlightening, and I hope you tell all of your friends. And if you want me to continue to give this quality of knowledge and probably, grow what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.thefunkyacademic.com and kick in either one big donation or a monthly donation. And definitely tell all of your friends. And send this to all of your populist friends or all of your left group friends. Post this on your Facebook and on your Twitter, because I'm just spitting the truth. And I will talk to you at another time. Peace.